chord.
No, no, of course not. I'm utterly indifferent to the whole question of suitability, as indeed I think Bach was. Mind you, I would be prepared to argue that in certain circumstances, in particular repertoire, the piano can get you a lot closer to Bach's conceptual notions than the harpsichord ever can. I mean, if you consider that all of the violin sonatas, all of the cello sonatas are really trio sonatas, and that the harpsichord, the keyboard instrument, forms 2/3 of that trio. It's just unrealistic to think that the harpsichord can ever balance off against the violin, for example, in the way that the piano can. And no way that anything can do as well as we just did, of course, but you just can't hear the interplay of the textures as successfully enunciated with the harpsichord as you can with the piano, even with the cello doubling the bass line. But as far as the solo repertoire is concerned, I think there really is a very serious overreaction. There's a tendency to imagine that only performances on the harpsichord or the clavichord have this stamp of authenticity, and I think that's just musicological overkill. And it's also a selective kind of discrimination, because one doesn't hear anybody complaining about the fact that Chopin's music is always played on modern pianos, which have about as much in common with the pianos that Chopin himself used as Chopin's pianos had in common with the harpsichord, but as far as I know, there is no big back to the Pleyel movement at the moment.
Well, okay, Glenn, that's fine if you start talking about the art of fugue or the inventions or even some parts of the well-tempered clavier. But pieces like the chromatic fantasia, for instance, certainly could never be called absolute music by any stretch of the imagination. So it seems to me that if ever there was a piece written for a specific instrument, that's it. I mean, it's crying out for a harpsichord just as much as a Chopin nocturne cries out for a piano.
Yeah, well, I'll have to give you that, Bruno. If there's one piece written for a keyboard, it's the chromatic fantasia. That, I must tell you, is a first, and it's also a last. My first and last performance of any part of the Chromatic Fantasia.
Do you mean that you don't like it?
Oh, I quite cordially hate it. Back in my student days, you know, most pianists avoided all the really important Bach works like the plague, but they had to play something to open their recitals before they got to the really good stuff like Chopin Nocturnes and Debussy Preludes, maybe even Beethoven Sonatas. So they almost inevitably chose one of two pieces. Either it was the Italian Concerto or it was this monstrosity. I think, to be fair to the piece, that it does give about as good a glimpse of Bach the improviser as opposed to Bach the organizer as we're probably ever going to get. I mean, the harmony wanders all over the lot. You know, it's very loosely connected by these